What I think I'm going to start by doing is to answer the question that I get most often as I move around the city of Atlanta. And people want to know what it's like and how's it going. So I'm going to respond to that in the form of a small joke that I keep in mind. My father, who's sitting at that table, June Reed, would describe it as a Jimmy Jenkins moment. And Jimmy Jenkins was a young man from South Georgia, and during the height of World War II, he was called in to service. Jimmy Jenkins went to Fort Bragg to be trained for the great World War II, and he was at Fort Bragg, and Jimmy Jenkins was going through training, and he was just the worst. I mean, he was late at revelry, his shoes weren't shined. I mean, he just did not have a very good experience going through basic training. He was constantly in trouble. The Sergeant Jones, who was responsible for training him, always tried, but he just never quite got it right. Well, Jimmy stuck with it, and somehow he got through it, and then he was deployed to Normandy to prepare for the great battle there. Well, as fate would have it, the sergeant was deployed to prepare for the great invasion as well. So the sergeant shows up, and as soon as he's getting off the bus, he's getting situated, he's looking over his men, and he sees Jimmy Jenkins over in the corner, and he's like, "Is that Jimmy?" And Jimmy looked at the sergeant. He said, "It's me, Sergeant." And the sergeant said, "Not Jimmy again." So he goes and he gets situated, and he's thinking about Jimmy Jenkins. Jimmy's the same old Jimmy. He's still late. He's never on time. His uniform isn't pressed. So the sergeant decides that I'm going to do something about this. He says, "Jimmy, come here." Jimmy comes, walks over to the sergeant. He says, "How can I help you, Sergeant?" And the sergeant tells Jimmy, he said, "You see that mountain over there, way over there?" And Jimmy says, "I see it, Sergeant." And the sergeant says, "I want you to grab your equipment, and I want you to go and man that mountain and be a lookout for us," thinking that he's gotten rid of Jimmy. Well, Jimmy says, "I'll be happy to, Sergeant." Jimmy loads his backpack up, and he takes off, and they see him walking up the mountain all alone. And he's over there, and he's getting comfortable. He's getting situated in his foxhole, and wouldn't you know it, there's an invasion coming up the mountain. So Jimmy looks out of his foxhole, and he sees a troop of men coming up at him. Well, Jimmy starts throwing grenades, and he gets his machine gun out, and he takes out this whole troop of people coming up. And the sergeant looks over, and he sees the mountain, and there's gunfire. So him being a sergeant, he grabs a group of people. They run over to the mountain to back up Jimmy. Well, Jimmy looks up, and he's fighting, and he's throwing grenades. And by the time the sergeant got there, Dennis, it was all taken care of. And so they looked over in the foxhole at little Jimmy. And Jimmy had a cigarette, and he was shaking, and he was smoking. And the sergeant looked down. He said, "Jimmy?" And Jimmy said, "Yes, Sergeant." He said, "I didn't know you had it in you. I'm so proud of you." And Jimmy looked back at the sergeant. He said, "Sergeant, things are a little different when you're in business for yourself." Well, that's what it's been like in the last 23 days. So many things that I thought were going to be just fine. I think Cornel West said it at the ML King ceremony. You're running for mayor, and everybody's celebrating you and applauding you. And then he said they hand you the key to the city, and they said, "Guess what? We got no money." Seriously, though. I will tell you that I have loved every single moment that I've been mayor of this city, and that we do, in fact, face very challenging times. The most serious threat to the city, as I talked about during my campaign, and I'm so happy to see so many members of the city council here, is the pension crisis that we face. I had a briefing this morning at 9 o'clock in my office with John Malott, who is the former treasurer for Cox Enterprise, who was responsible for the fiscal affairs of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And it is very bad. Let me tell you where we are. Today, our city is spending $1 out of $5 in the general fund on pension benefits right now. That number has risen from $40 million in 2000 to more than $140 million in the last budget cycle. If it continues at the current pace that it's on, it has grown at between 9 and 14% a year. If we do not confront the challenge that was created by our pension problems, the city will really only be in the business of paying its pension benefits, providing police, and providing fire. But that's not really the Atlanta that I know. And that's why I asked John Malott to assemble a panel of experts. Daniel Kober is here for Baker Donaldson. He will be a part of that panel as well, and I want to thank you for your service, because we have to face this challenge immediately, because it is literally absorbing the greatness of Atlanta. For a liability to go from $40 million to $140 million of a $541 million general fund, it is taking our future away from us. Let me tell you what I mean. If Atlanta wants to start an initiative to fund the arts in a sustained way, for Atlanta to be a great city as it relates to arts and culture, we're going to have to find a way as a region to deploy about $10 million a year to arts in a sustained way, much in the manner that they do in Denver. Where is that money? It is in the pension challenge. If Atlanta will have closing dollars, Sam, so that when we're recruiting new business and trying to create jobs and trying to partner with the Metro Chamber, we need money to attract businesses into the heart of the city, and we need money to close the deal. That money is in the pension challenge that we're facing. And the reason that I am coming to this distinguished group with this issue is because I am going to need your help explaining to the citizens of Atlanta that I do not have hostility towards anyone, any union or any former employee of the city, but that we have to find a way, because all we're doing right now is being put in a position where we can't do anything but the basics. And if we don't meet this challenge, Atlanta will not be a city where you come to live and raise your family and stay. It will be a city where you are a transient. I also campaigned on keeping the city safe. There is no more important issue to me, and I'm going to need your help there as well. I have asked Peter Amon, who is my chief operating officer, to do a complete scrub of the city's finances so that every free dollar in the short run can be directed towards keeping you safe. Because crime puts at risk everything we've all worked to build. And I'm also going to enforce the panhandling laws in the city of Atlanta once and for all. Now, I'm going to need your help because we need to change the conversation around panhandling. We need to separate panhandling from homelessness. People who are genuinely homeless, who have had challenges in their lives, and who have been knocked down will find an Atlanta that is compassionate and that will do all it can, Trip. But people who are panhandlers will not be tolerated, not just in the tourism district, but in this city. And let me tell you why. You know, Kwanzaa, whenever we start to do something progressive and actually deal with this challenge, many of our friends on the left call us heartless. But do you know the folks that they never talk about? They don't talk about the folks who make the beds in the hotels, the cooks in the kitchen, the hostess at the restaurant, the businesses that are placed in jeopardy because of panhandling. And they don't see the reports that come from the Georgia World Congress Center that cite panhandling as the second greatest threat to our convention and tourism business, which does what? Puts people to work. See, I've never heard that side of the argument, Sharon. So we're going to be passionate, but we're going to deal with this issue.